or do kinds of weird eyeball rolling, like weird, strange things, showing there's like chaos going on. And what's really trippy about attachment theory is that they developed this thing called the adult attachment interview. Mm-hmm. They interview the parent before the baby's ever born. And based on the style of speech that the parent has, based on the way that the parent talks about his or her own history, they can predict with 85% accuracy what kind of attachment the baby's going to have to that parent. Mm. So I just want to bring that up because people always want to go back and say it's the baby's fault. This baby had a funny constitution or something like that. Constitution, colicky baby, this or that. But they can predict with 85% accuracy from the way that the parent talks about his or her own experience what kind of attachment is going to happen here. So, and the major predictor of a secure attachment is what they call a coherent narrative from the parent. That the parent can actually, whatever trauma there's been, whatever horrors there have been, the parent can actually talk sort of calmly and in a kind of contained way that sort of makes sense. Like, in other words, parents done some work to figure out their own stuff, and it's kind of gotten with it a little bit.
Well, it's interesting though, Sandra, that in that, even if the parent has a coherent story, chances are that coherent story will be a heteronormative one.
Right. Exactly. So what does that mean in terms of for the gay baby, or the gay child growing up?
Because you could have that coherent story, parent telling it. You could have a securely attached child, but the question of the gayness still would be a question in there. So you could have a securely attached gay child, but the mother still could be not okay with the gayness.
I think part of what I keep hearing from you is there's 3 different levels, it seems like, from what you've been talking about, that you're going to talk about each one. So it seems to me like there is that level that you're talking about, but that's a later aspect of a gay experience. I think maybe there's an earlier state of it, which is this place of the invisibility or...
I just said that. I said that in the secure attachment, the mother...
But you can't have a secure attachment, I think, at one level, around this aspect.
Yeah, that's what I said. But I think, though, with the new test, that you could have the secure attachment, and you would, in the telling of the parents telling the life story, and you still have a gay child where they're not coherent around that aspect.
Well, it's, given the heteronormativity of the culture, any researchers out there? It's like, how do we hypothesize this?
But you can study it. You can study attachment styles in gay women and men, and that would be your answer. It would be straightforward. If this misattunement results in some sort of attachment issue, you would see more difficulty you would see a higher rate of incidence of insecure attachment among gay and lesbian. That would be the answer to your question. I don't know if that's been researched yet, but that would be a researcher sort of question.
Yeah.
I don't know that
you need a long study for that, right?
You would need a long study for that.
Yeah.
Right, and again, we run up against the prohibition. How dare you how do we identify that this is a gay child?
Right.
A gay infant. Just even I can feel in myself, and that this is part of what I think you're kind of naming is like, kind of, how do you talk about a gay infant? We don't talk about that. We're not allowed to talk about that in some way, that's some, there's something weird about that. But, why not? Why can't we talk about that? Why can't we postulate that, kind of what Roger was saying, that there's a predisposition that's already there. It doesn't, when does it all of a sudden show up at age 3, and before that it wasn't anywhere in sight somehow? I don't think so. That doesn't feel right to me. And I'm kind of going by, when I'm so this is what I say, I'm not an authority. This is all just like, a lot of it based on just my own trying to feel into my own experience as a lesbian, which is completely and totally forbidden to do. actually, at some level. So, just trying to feel into it. Here.
Can I just add something though?
Yeah.
When you were talking a while back, and when was it Flint? You were saying what you said. I was thinking, what came to mind is I have noticed in my own work with myself that there's times where, and I have a straight therapist who's excellent, but I find that I have to help her a little bit sometimes in understanding me as a lesbian, even though she's very open, and it comes around feeling illegitimate and feeling invisible, and I've had to explain it to her several times, and I think when you guys were talking about that, I thought, that's it though. Because for me, that is so upsetting, because I feel like I live with that every single day. That we're not even allowed to exist legitimately.
And you're an adult feeling that.
Right.
In a room with another adult.
Right.
Who you value and trust and have a relationship
And I have
with,
cognitive
and you know that
faculties
that
to make
person
sense
has
of
your
it.
best interests at
Right.
heart, and you're still feeling, oh my God, this person, I'm not legitimate in this person's eyes.
It's an
Can you
alienating
imagine
feeling.
that
Right.
dependent beingness blob that you are at that point?
I don't even think an infant, I mean, I guess, in a way, I agree with what you're saying, and I would agree with, in a way, I feel like there's got to be something that integrates those two. 'Cause I guess anything that gets projected onto a child at that age doesn't really fully take form until later, even though the beginnings of it is right there in that first year.
Well, sure, that we're all on a developmental curve, but I think the foundation, this is like Winnicott, I love Winnicott, and I think all the object relations theorists, it's like, the foundation is critical. Everything's built on the foundation. Here, I had a dream somewhere a few years back, and I had a house, it was gorgeous, a big, tall house, and had this big, huge crack in the foundation in the basement, and the whole thing had to come down. And I was like, wow, that's a bummer. Oh man, I must spent years constructing this fucker. But I'm telling you, it's coming down. If it's not coming, it's like facing one's own mortality, imminently doesn't bring it down. I don't know what, but I'm telling you, it's entrenched. That's the other thing. It's entrenched. It's amazing. The defenses against feeling this level of trauma. It's trauma. Yeah, feeling this level of trauma. Defenses are profound.
Could you say something about her rage? Because I feel like that's important here in how this conversation's going tonight.
Oh, I feel her rage that you're bringing it up. I just don't know what to talk about. Yeah. Why don't you? And toxic shame, and both of these things I think are important to talk about.
Yeah, well, I think it's worth naming that there's a little bit of a reenactment tonight around that there's a way that what my own experience of what happened in my relationship with my mother is that because of her demands for me to be a straight boy, that generates, as I've done my own inner work, that generates a tremendous hurt rage in me. And that hurt rage is both infantile, but also incredibly important for being able to articulate and defend a gay identity. And there's a way that it's important to understand, I think, the way that there can be both a theoretical position that's valid and also hurt rage that's mixed up in that.
Yeah, just to echo what Roger said, that if we don't propagate this radical idea that really exists, and we've got a ton of testament here to it, that this is happening at a really young age and throughout the process, and the coming out process for women and gay men is a recapitulation, I think, of this early experience. Because then the baby is verbal, then the mommy is conscious. And sometimes that exchange is so toxic. And finally the kid is online in some way, but that the whole shame gets recapitulated, and then that hurt anger essentially really needs to take off. And we know we're supposed to love our mothers, and we did love our mothers, and we know intellectually they did love us, but it doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work best. And yes, good enough gets us where we are, but think of where we might have been. Now, we got a lot of catching up to do, and I'm catching up. Thank you, and everybody in this room, men and women, for like getting online.
It does sound like in the relationship that as an adult you would have to get those needs met that you didn't get. So you, as an adult, somehow you need to have that at one point in your life. Otherwise, I'm just thinking back at the therapeutic relationship and how mismatched that can continue to be, and just kind of continue to re-traumatize, to use that word, again and again. So it is important to get that from primary relationships, perhaps, and as adults. And you can still, I'm a strong believer in being able to repair those, obviously, and just being able to have those early needs met.
Well, I think what
With the secure partner, I think that's the key word.
well, I feel like one of the things I'm trying to say, you're sort of pointing out that like in our conversation, you know, there's a way like, you know, I feel some hurt rage, like I want you to see it my, you know, you become my mother who's not seeing it my way, you know, and like I can feel my kids like, I want you to see it my way, I need you to mirror me, you know, well, you know, and that's going to come up in the transference in the relationship with the therapist, that's going to be there. And one of the things I want to say that's incredibly important, it's incredibly hard as a gay person to make an allegiance with the hurt, rage baby and the traumatized parts of the self. It's really, really hard because heteronormativity and everything says, well, they did the best they can, this is what it is, you know, she did the best she could, I tried, you know, and all of the effects of heteronormativity are taken in as a form of terrible toxic shame, of terrible feelings of self-loathing that make it incredibly, incredibly hard to have empathy for oneself. As you know, and I think all humans struggle with this, but I think gay people struggle with it particularly in a particular kind of way, and that in the therapy, in the clinical setting, one of the things that the therapist can do is make an allegiance with the gay baby and sort of, you know, say there's a gay baby, there's a lesbian baby, and to interact with and to be looking for opportunities to actually mirror that lesbian baby back to the client. That's, you know, whenever the client says, I feel invisible, I don't feel seen, there's the lesbian baby. Of course she didn't feel seen. Now that's reparative. Because what parent ever said, oh, right, there's my little lesbian baby? Because one of the points is that, one of the things that the therapist can do is hold that there's tremendous value in lesbian love. That lesbian love has a value. It's not just neutral. It's not just this other form that has none of its own particular qualities. Lesbian love is, you know, was the Sappho's poetry, which is the first poetry about romantic love between two human beings, was birthed out of the force of the double in lesbian love. Gertrude Stein, Gertrude Stein was like the greatest writer of the century. Emily Dickinson, the greatest poet of the century before. You know, we can go on and on. How that the creativity of these women was fueled by their relationship to the lesbian double, and it's not an accident that they were lesbians and they just happened to be putting out whatever they're putting out in the world. And the therapist can hold that out for the lesbian client. And I know, you know, so I know that there's going to be, for me, you know, with my therapist, in working with this, if there's been like, you know, terrible projections of persecutory objects onto the therapist, you know, it'll kind of what you were evoking, and that's going to be there. this intense feeling of judgment and persecution and paranoia, and this person, yeah, I'm about to get attacked, I'm about to get annihilated. This is pretty ubiquitous in lesbian, gay and lesbian psychology. But one of the things that really kept me there was this story that kept getting told to me about the value of being a lesbian.